Will this be the year Titans receiver Treylon Burks finds his groove? Just over 600 yards receiving in 2 seasons. Injuries have been a big issue.
Can stay healthy, doing whatever I need to take care of my body.
I'll admit, this is a storyline that I've been sleeping on all off season long, because at first I didn't think it was a big deal. There were just some sound bites here and there from various members of the Tennessee Titans suggesting that one of their players wasn't necessarily the best. And I figured that maybe some of this content was taken out of context, but more recently, people have been very harsh on this one player, which is enough for us to say that we may have a brand new contender for the worst trade ever. This trade was so bad that it literally got a general manager fired, it caused the team to switch quarterbacks, and this team essentially went from a contender to an afterthought as a result of this trade. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? We're currently in the midst of a wide receiver renaissance. I mean, you're seeing wide receivers getting paid left and right, and that number is only going to inflate more and more. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown got paid $30.02 million, making him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. In addition to that, the Philadelphia Eagles announced that they were going to extend Devontae Smith for $25 million a year annually, before making AJ Brown the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL with $32 million a year annually. Then you have Justin Jefferson, who's getting paid $35 million a year annually, and this is before CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins need to get paid. But as a result of this contract, the previous champion for the highest paid contract in the NFL, Tyreek Hill, definitely started to feel some type of way. So his agent Drew Rosenhaus said this:
"It's safe to, acknowledge that I've been in touch with Chris Greer and Brandon Shore of the Dolphins. I certainly have a fluid line of communication with them, and I've shared with them how Tyreek feels. And I'll also reiterate that Tyreek has said that he would love to finish his career here with the Dolphins. So without getting into any more specifics, the Dolphins know how we feel."
The last time the wide receiver market blew up to this extent was the 2022 offseason. You saw Devontae Adams break the bank when the Green Bay Packers traded him to the Las Vegas Raiders. Shortly after, you saw Tyreek Hill break the bank when he got traded to the Miami Dolphins and got paid $30 million a year annually. But during this period of time, AJ Brown was trying to get a contract extension from the Tennessee Titans. He only really wanted like $25 million a year annually, which back then was a lot of money, but it wasn't necessarily the craziest request. But you see, since this wide receiver market was just about to blow up, John Robinson didn't know if it was a much more intelligent decision to keep AJ Brown on the roster or to trade AJ Brown and draft a wide receiver in the first round of the NFL draft. Doing so would allow the Tennessee Titans to have a potential wide receiver 1 on an undervalued contract for the next 5 years. And it's impossible to say whether or not this would 100% work. There are instances in NFL history where this has worked. My favorite case being when the Minnesota Vikings traded Stephon Diggs to the Buffalo Bills for the very draft pick that would become Justin Jefferson. Sometimes this strategy works, and sometimes it blows up so badly in your face that the team that you trade your wide receiver to becomes a Super Bowl contender, and the person that you draft is such an egregious bust that there are questions of whether or not he will even be starting for your team this year. Now look, man, I took my time before throwing the B word at Treylon Burks, but he has had a very rocky start to his career. In his very first training camp, this man went viral on our YouTube channel for not being able to make it through his first training camp and being out of shape. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, the exact details of the trade was the Philadelphia Eagles traded the 18th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft to the Tennessee Titans for AJ Brown. And Mike Vrabel's reaction tells you everything you need to know. I mean, you can tell this is an individual that isn't happy, and I don't blame him for not being happy, because this one trade was a huge contributor to Mike Vrabel eventually losing his job. I mean, after this trade, the Tennessee Titans weren't the same again. Treylon Burks struggled in his first training camp, and there were reports of him being out of shape. He went viral on our YouTube channel for that reason. All right, maybe the thumbnail had something to do with that. But that was just the very tip of the iceberg. Treylon Burks would play in 11 games in his rookie season and would come down with 33 receptions and 444 receiving yards. He was supposed to take a huge leap the very next year, but he didn't really do that. Starting in 8 games, coming down with 16 receptions for 221 receiving yards. The Tennessee Titans were never the same again following the drafting of Treylon Burks. It would go 7-10 in 2022 before going 6-11 in 2023. Now, John Robinson, the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, got fired, and rightfully so, because it was definitely not the right call. He should have just paid AJ Brown. But in addition to this, Mike Vrabel also got fired. Now, the reason why Mike Vrabel got fired was apparently he was a huge yes man that surrounded himself with questionable coaching staff, and Tennessee just wanted a brand new front office. But I will say it is pretty peculiar that the moment you trade your best player on offense, your team goes from 12-5 and winning the division to 7-10, and then eventually 6-11. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles were doing okay up until this past year, but it was clearly a brilliant move. Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate during the 2022 season, and the Philadelphia Eagles made it to the Super Bowl. And they're consistently reloading more and more, man, and I hate to see it because I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and we're gonna experience so much pain over the next couple of years. If you want to know why the Cowboys are going to experience pain from a Cowboy fan, I'll leave a link to that in the end screen. You can see the video in front of you right now. More recently, we have more evidence that this might be the worst trade in NFL history, because Treylon Burks' teammates aren't really going out to bat for him. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was asked earlier on in the offseason if people were sleeping on Treylon Burks, and this was his reaction.
For the additions, trying to think I answer that without like a negative sound bite. Are we sleeping on Treylon? Nein means no in German.
Now, I heard this in May and I figured, okay, maybe people are just taking this interview and twisting it out of context. But very shortly after, the Tennessee Titans' brand new head coach, Brian Callahan, said this about Treylon Burks, and it really sounds like this man's career might be over very soon.
You're not one of the top 2 or 3 guys. You're going to have to contribute on teams, and you know, he's a guy in that mold that if you're trying to get a hat on game day and be one of the 46 active, you got to play a role on special teams, especially as a skill player.
Having your head coach say that you either need to make the special teams roster or you're not going to be playing football for this roster is absolutely insane. The Tennessee Titans clearly don't believe in Treylon Burks, and why would that be the case? They're in a completely different situation. When they drafted Treylon Burks, they were hoping he would be able to come in right away, help Ryan Tannehill, and hopefully the Tennessee Titans would be able to save enough money on the salary cap and still be able to contend for the playoffs. But if you take a look at this team's offseason, this team is clearly trying to compete now. They traded for L'Jarius Sneed in late March. But that's not all. They have DeAndre Hopkins returning. They signed Calvin Ridley to an incredible contract, paying him $23 million a year annually. And then on top of that, they brought in Tyler Boyd, who in my opinion was a more than capable wide receiver too in Cincinnati, but he was buried on the depth chart behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase over there. So obviously, Brian Callahan, who comes out of Cincinnati, might show some more favoritism to Tyler Boyd than the draft bust that the Tennessee Titans drafted 2 years ago under the previous general manager. The Titans no longer have a huge attachment to Treylon Burks, and it makes a lot of sense. But is Treylon Burks really as bad as people are saying? Well, this is what his wide receiver coach has to say about him.
Attitude's great. You know, effort's been good. One of the things that somebody said something about his effort in practice the other day. The one thing I would mention that a lot of those guys come straight from special teams and they're running like 100 yards up and down the field. And when they get to my period, my individual period, we have only 8 minutes. So what I tell them to do is they can tone it down a little bit, go through the route technique part of it, not so much speed, because after 8 minutes, we go back full speed, the routes are there with the quarterbacks. So some of that, I give them a little leeway.
At the end of the day, if you're a Titans fan, obviously this stings, but the good news is it seems like the Tennessee Titans are making a push towards contention. They made some aggressive moves this offseason, and their team, at least on paper, is looking very solid. They drafted offensive line in the first round. They got a great wide receiver core for Will Levis. Yeah, it sucks that they lost Derrick Henry, and personally, I don't know if Tony Pollard is capable of picking up the slack, but all in all, I think this is a team that could challenge for AFC South South supremacy, or at least make it into the wild card depending on how their matchups versus the Texans go, and depending on whether or not the Jacksonville Jaguars could live up to their potential this year. I could see the Tennessee Titans being competitive, but there's no question about it. As of right now, there's a reason why every person involved in this trade for Treylon Burks has now been fired. And it's because this is without a doubt one of the worst trades in NFL history. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.